Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Would you mind if I confided in you for a moment about some career fears that I've currently developed? I'm getting rather worried about my position here at LBC because it appears that very slowly but surely the people historically on the other side of various arguments are all realising I was right all along. Boris Johnson, it would appear, has now been unveiled as an absolute heel and charlatan, even to the realisation of, shall we say, some traditional, rather friendly people towards him. Brexit, inevitably, will be next, as Nissan joins the long line of companies expressing their disquiet at the way things are unfolding. Lord Ashcroft, one of the key backers of the Brexit campaign, has just published a blog which offers advice to businesses who will need an EU base after the Brexit that people like him assured us would actually enhance and improve British businesses' ability to trade with Europe. These are very strange times. So I think I might rebrand myself as a kind of racist rabble-rouser. I think I've got, because I've often swum against the tide of traditional right-wing commentary, Boris Johnson being a great case in point. This is an astonishing story, you know, that LBC have dug up. I mean, absolutely astonishing. He rushed through this cycle superhighway so that he could have his name on it. He probably had visions of it being called the Boris something, like he had visions of the Garden Bridge, for which millions of pounds are still unaccounted for, being called the Boris Bridge. He rushed it through knowing that it'd have to be dug up again. If anything sums the man up, surely it's that. But I mean, I need a new act, because I've spent the last, since he was mayor, I've been explaining to people why you shouldn't trust him as far as you can spit. And now everyone realises I was right. I need a new act. What am I going to do? Am I going to launch the Boris rehabilitation campaign? I'm only happy when I'm swimming against the tide of right-wing received wisdom. And now finally it seems to be falling into place with my long-held views. I don't know what to do. What am I going to do when everybody realises that Brexit's bad? I'm going to have to start arguing that it's actually quite a good idea and everybody else doesn't realise. I mean, seriously, I've talked myself out of a job on LBC. Do you think they'll let me start playing records or talk about football? It's getting ridiculous, truly ridiculous. And now, of course, we know that one of the main reasons, one of the main areas of our failure to understand what could possibly have motivated these people to embark upon such a catastrophic act of self-destruction. We now know they made a bunch of money out of it. And if we come out with no deal and the pound tanks again, I'm 99% certain they've already got the investments in place to ensure that's what they're pushing for next. Yet another big payday. Ooh, and I suppose if you are in the business of making huge amounts of money out of credulous and gullible individuals, now would be the time to open a fund in Dublin. I don't know. I mean, I don't really understand these matters, but it is getting it's getting a bit strange to be me, actually. So we're not talking about any of that today. I'm going to talk about something that I've changed my mind on recently, and we'll see whether you have as well. The royal family. Bear with me. You have here a £369 million refurbishment. Now, I kind of want people who are angry about that to ring me today, but I'm not going to pretend that I am. And I don't really understand why. If I had to distill what I've learned in the last 2 or 3 years down to one single observation, it's not a happy thought, but it is the realisation that many, many more people than I ever acknowledged really do subscribe to the school of thought that the circumstances of our birth are somehow an indicator of our worth, birth and worth. You see it very much with, I mean, you see, when Jared Kushner started swanning around the Middle East on a special mission from his father-in-law, I thought that was slightly outrageous, but is it any more outrageous than Prince William turning up in the Middle East? I mean, it's an accident of birth. Kushner happens to be married to a woman who happens to be the daughter of a man who is inexplicably the President of the United States of America. So why shouldn't he? What's his role? Why has he got any less right to go glad-handing around the Middle East than Prince William? Accident of birth. And then the other stuff, when you look at how we speak about Roma at the moment, big news in continental Europe, immigration in general, asylum seekers, refugees, the idea that birth and worth are intrinsically linked is a lot more commonplace than I ever realised. So I used to joke, I still will, and I don't intend to stop the doff cap, tug forelock, vote Rees-Mogg. But I don't know if it's a psychological trait or learned behaviour. I'm pretty sure that the way I was raised, particularly by my mum, was not to ever believe that anybody was better than me. You know, that I had the right to all the glittering prizes. The notion of know your place was a million miles away from what my mum taught my sister and I. Know your place. There is no place. There's absolutely nowhere that you don't have the right to be. And yet it appears that I, without noticing, spent 46 years in a country where arguably a majority of people think they should know their place. All of which is a slightly autobiographical, psychodramatic backdrop to a question about the refurbishment of Buckingham Palace. 369 million quid. Do you want to know how the money's going to be raised? The Crown Estate, which owns properties and land across Britain, they currently give 15% of their annual profits to the Queen. For at least 10 years, that's going to go up to 25%. So this financial year, that would be about 82.2 million quid. That is how they're going to pay for the £369 million refurbishment of Buckingham Palace. And I am being incredibly autobiographical today, because I think the topic for the first hour is going to be, I can't get cross about this, and I don't understand why. 0345 6060 973. We're in a period of economic difficulty that is almost certain to get considerably worse. You know that I have historically, I don't have a problem with inherited wealth, but I have a problem with inherited entitlement. The idea that because of who your father is, I should treat you differently from that person over there who's got a different father or mother or grandmother. Do you see what I mean? They're very English. I mean, it's the essence of the class system in a way. The idea that because you were born with a silver spoon in your mouth, plebs like me should doff cap, tug forelock. I hate that. I mean, I genuinely hate it. I think it is responsible for almost all of the social problems that we have in Britain historically. And I used to have a problem with the royal family. I'm pretty sure, and you may pick me up on this, that when I started doing this job, I would have argued, I think I may even have argued for the abolition of the royal family. I wish I'd kept a diary. I wish someone had recorded the radio shows. I'd be able to double-check and do a little search on an online archive. I'd go, well, you did what? You used to think what? Things I've changed my mind on over the years. Not a long chapter, but an interesting one. I'm pretty sure I was a Republican, in some sense, and I just can't... I can't muster up the vaguest emotional disquiet about a story involving 369 million quid of money that presumably in some sense gets traced back to the massive land grab undertaken by William the Conqueror or Henry VIII or whichever little bit of the Crown Estate you want to focus on, being used to tart up the Queen's house when homelessness has gone up in this country every year for the last 8 years. I mean, all of the... I'm having some sort of... I'm having some sort of crisis. All of the things that normally get me angry fit into this story, especially the homelessness angle, which I'd overlooked. And I can't. I think I approve. I think I quite like the Queen. I wonder whether it's all Prince Harry and Prince William's fault. Well, especially Prince Harry. Jury's still out on Prince William for me. His father is a bit of a doofus. Have you seen how much money his father has been spending on luxury trips? 107,703 quid on a private jet. That was William and Kate. Prince Charles used a luxury RAF aircraft for a tour of South Asia, which ended with a travel bill more than 3 times higher than the one that William and Kate ran up when they were on a similar tour. So the profligacy of Prince Charles is a problem. Why? Can I do that? Or is that completely self-regarding and self-obsessed? Can I ask you to tell me why I'm not crosser about the 369 million quid being spent on Buckingham Palace? I don't just want to talk about me, I'd like to talk about you as well. Would you be able to see it through the lens of your own experience? Have you changed your mind? Why have you changed your mind about the royal family in the course of your life? 0345 6060 973. Because I think I might just have been battered into submission. It must be exhausting. It's exhausting being a Republican. Because every now and then there's a wedding or an anniversary, a jubilee, and the whole country goes nuts. So you might think, even during Victoria's reign, there were pockets of Republican upsurges and upticks, It was sort of about the 1870s or 80s, I think, was a particularly fertile period for fermenting against the royal family. But then a wedding comes along, or a birth, God forbid they have a baby, Everyone's out there waving their flags, camped outside the hospital. It must be absolutely exhausting being anti-royal. Because the entire country grinds to a standstill every time they do something remotely exciting. So, politically speaking, anybody who enjoys this programme from the perspective of feeling comforted and educated by it should, theoretically, have a problem with the royal family. Everybody who tunes into this programme religiously because they're addicted to being furious and terrified should, theoretically, love the royal family. And yet today, for me, I think the money's probably worth it. You ever see people outside Buckingham Palace? It's like a point of pilgrimage for people. Do you know what I used to say? I always used to say, people still visit the pyramids. It's been a while since there were any pharaohs around. So the idea that tourism somehow is contingent upon the personnel, the individuals, the human element of the royal family, rather than the historical and the architectural elements, is something I used to argue furiously for. But I can't. I wonder if I'm just too cross about everything else. I wonder if Brexit has taken up the part of my personality where I used to have a little bit of room for railing against the inherited privilege and entitlement that the royal family represents. I remember when my kids were born and they started getting into princesses like almost all little girls do. And I had to quiet my little voice inside going, well, I don't want you to be a princess. What do you want to be a princess for? You're never going to be a princess. Why would you aspire to being a princess? And my wife would say, darling, she's 3. I say, all right, sorry, yeah, all right. Let it go, all of that. There's a lot to cover, but basically I suppose I'm asking you, what do you think about the royal family? And do you know who I'd really like to talk to today? I'd really like to talk to people who've changed their mind quite seriously about... I love mind changing. It's almost the point of everything we do together, isn't it? Just the pleasure of feeling your mind change because you've thought about stuff and understood it better than you did before. Have you changed your mind about the royal family? And do you know why? And, of course, that involves traffic moving in both directions. 0345 60 60 973. And, I mean, if you are kind enough to listen closely to the programme on a regular basis, could you possibly help me out? Because I have changed my mind, it seems, about the royal family. But at this point in proceedings, I have no idea why. So I've got the what, but I've got no why. Completely odd topic today. We're originally just wondering why people change their minds about the royal family. And here's a thought for you, possibly a starter for 10. Maybe when I get on my high horse about considering birth as having a worth, you know, the idea that we should know our place, I get very, very frustrated by the doff cap, tug forelock mentality because it keeps poor people poor. I wonder if it's actually more about what you do with the position. So... I said that some people would have been following my own developments more closely than I have, and Owen's already been in touch to say it was when they intervened on mental health about a year ago that you changed your view about the royal family. He's right, isn't he? This is great. It's like I've got a million Boswells. And that is part of it. So it's what you do with the position. If you who could possibly be objectionable towards the royal family if the royal family did consistently amazing things? I mean, I'm not saying that they do or that they have, but could you really have a problem with a system of inheritance if the people doing the inheriting were just most excellent to each other? Well, to us. Anyway, I'll shut up. Dean's in Heathrow. Dean, quick, interrupt me. I seem to be going a bit doolally. What would you like to say?
I'd just like to say that prior to Grenfell, I was vehemently against the royal family.
Yeah.
You know, to me, they were wasting money the country desperately needed. But after seeing William and the Queen visit, and the Queen was verbally attacked by somebody saying how, you know, it was her fault that Grenfell happened.
Oh, really?
You know, the way Prince William defended her and said, look, you know, this is not her fault at all.
I don't remember that.
This is the government's fault. It wasn't very publicised.
Prince William said it was the government's fault?
Yeah.
No, he didn't, Dean.
The local government, honestly.
No, he didn't.
He did, honestly.
He didn't.
Honestly,
he didn't.
I've seen the video.
He did not. Prince William did not say that Grenfell was the responsibility of the local government or the national government.
He did.
All right, send me the video and we'll ring you back, yeah? James at lbc.co.uk.
Cheers, man.
No, I mean it. Send it.
Oh, yeah, I'll send it in.
Nice one. Jodie's in... We could have had the scoop of our lives here, folks. Seriously, alert the Pulitzer. The Orwell Prize has already gone to Carol Cadwallader. Rats. Jodie's in Hampton. Jodie, what's going on?
Hi, I used to just be sort of disinterested in the whole royal family, but not in a way that was, against them in any way. I was quite happy for them to do what they're doing and paid no attention. But now, you look at what's going on, and it's not just like your last caller said, Grenfell, but you look at what's going on with the NHS, you look at, like you said, the poverty, homeless and all that sort of thing, and you think to yourself, how can they possibly spend that amount of money on building or, say, renovating?
You're so right. You're absolutely right. What the hell is wrong with me?
But how can we? But it's not what the hell's wrong with you. I don't actually blame you for not taking too much of an interest and not, because what's the point? It's not going to change anything. It won't make.
Well, that's the opposite of how I live normally. I mean, it's the homelessness thing as well that's relevant, isn't it? Homelessness up yet again this year, up every year pretty much since David Cameron became Prime Minister. NHS, you're right, chronically underfunded. What else is there? I mean, there's so much.
What I find really interesting, actually, though, is the fact that, the general public attacks government quite openly and quite rightly so, because they are in charge. But actually, the royal family sit at the top and, spend all this money, whether it's their own, whether they gather it from the public or not. How can they spend? How can they justify that spend? If we found out that, say, I don't know, Theresa May spent that much on renovating her house, we'd have her head.
Well, I think that the English peasant is historically comfortable with inherited wealth.
But why is that?
I don't know, because they think maybe one day they might inherit a load?
I don't know. I think it's actually because it's quite comforting to take interest in the royal family and enjoy it. Like I said, I try not to get too involved in it, but I couldn't help but watch parts of the royal wedding.
No,
and
exactly.
It's the same when Kate and Will got married. You do take a slight interest, and you can't help but be happy for them. It's nice to see that public fairy tale.
Yeah, I know, but you could just wander down your local register office on a Saturday and watch 10 people getting wed. And
why do we allow it?
I don't know.
Why are we so for it? It's not okay.
It's very strange, isn't it? Do you think I'm just getting old?
Possibly.
I think
maybe that's happening to all of us. Maybe as we do get older and, we get on with our own lives more and more, we stop taking so much interest in what's actually going on right underneath our noses. But then again, we come across a homeless person on the street and you fumble in your pockets to give them the pennies or the pounds that you can gather. And actually that wouldn't be necessary if perhaps they took just 1 million of that 300
you could probably fix homelessness overnight by, as you suggest, taking a significant chunk from the Crown estate and just pumping it into the issue, and we don't, and I don't know why. Few theories. Brian suggests, James, you've been sucked in by the charm offensive that has been in motion since William and Kate met. I haven't, actually. I'm not man, they're not my favourites. I'm a Harry man. I'm Team Harry. Lisa says, I was in the Westway volunteering when the royals were there. Dean's story didn't happen. Well, we'll wait for the email. The Queen, however, refused a photo op based on the fact that the mourner was too distressed. She showed such compassion. I then stopped being anti-royal that day too. So Queen behaves like human, and a lifetime of antipathy towards entrenched and inherited privilege and wealth, utterly unjustifiable entrenched and inherited privilege and wealth, disappears. I'm not criticising you, Lisa, because I've been on a similar journey myself, but I haven't got the pivot point like you have, unless it was the intervention on mental health from all three of them last year, which was incredible. And Meghan Markle looks likely to use the position to do great work as well. So maybe it's not about the position's existence, it's about the position's occupant. Noah is in Grenoble in France. You got rid of your royal family, Noah. Well, what do you think of ours?
Yeah, well, I'm actually British, but I moved to France a couple of years ago, just after Brexit.
Yeah. What do you know about your... Just briefly, before we crack on with the royal family, what do you know about your future status at the minute?
Absolutely nothing.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Are you worried?
I'm a bit worried about it.
Yeah?
Yeah, but I've been a student for 2 years, so thankfully the French regulations mean that I could take French nationality in theory.
Right, so you can keep your options open.
Yeah.
Well, that was a cheery...
I don't want to come back.
That was a cheerful digression. I do apologise. Back to the royal family. Have you changed your mind about the British royal family since moving to France?
Yes. Well, essentially, around the 2012 Olympics, which for me was quite peak Britain, we had the Jubilee with the Olympics.
Didn't really realise at the time, did we? But that was the beginning of the end.
No.
Go on.
Yeah, that's that. But yeah, I had that and I was quite indifferent, quite enjoyed it, that whole British thing. But then coming here, I talked to everyone and they seem to think that the monarchy is ridiculous. And the idea of someone being born into a position of authority over someone else it's different to someone being born into a position of having more money than someone else.
Ah, you're right. The authority is the issue.
Yeah.
I guess because they don't seem to exercise any authority, that side of the argument...
Yeah, that's where it gets missed out, yeah. And the whole celebrity culture around it, it's a bit like the Kardashians, but just next level.
Smaller bottoms.
Yeah, exactly.
Although Kate Middleton's sister, of course, was famed chiefly for her posterior, like in the aftermath of that wedding.
Famous, certainly.
So it's a strange time. What do you think's gone wrong with me then?
Sorry?
What do you think's gone wrong with me?
With you?
Yeah. I should rail against all this sort of thing. It sort of sums up all the things that politically define me, and yet I'm quite surprisingly comfortable with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think on a British level as well, it's bizarre because everyone rails against the class system, everyone hates the rich.
Yeah, but they don't know, mate. This is the big lesson. It's because you're at university, you're educated, you don't know that outside of that, you're 70% likely to vote to remain in the European Union if you had a university degree. If you left school at 16, the number's about the same in the opposite direction. The more education and knowledge that you have, the more you think people must rail against inherited wealth and but they don't. They quietly rather like it. Doff cap, tug, forelock, vote, Rees-Mogg. Sarah's in Crystal Palace. Sarah, what would you like to say?
Well, firstly, James, I'm deeply, deeply disappointed in you.
I know,
you're
everyone is.
You're
I'm so
normally
sorry.
a sensible man.
I know. Debbie stopped listening for the first time in 12 years. She's turned me off. I hope she hasn't, so she heard that and she can turn me off now that she's got her mention. Go on, help me out then, Sarah. Help me out.
I think you've been seduced by the bread and circuses.
Yeah.
You know, this is throwing the peasants a little bit of entertainment to make them feel better because things are really bleak. Things are really bleak for people who think like you and I, who are very, very worried about the future, who are worried about the state of society and the fact that we see it getting worse. So I'm disappointed in you, but you're not a lost cause.
No,
I would just, from my point of view, I have changed my mind about the royal family, but I've gone from a Republican who saw them as an inconsequential distraction to a Republican who actually sees them as a deeply pernicious influence on our society. Take your mental health point, for example. One of the chief causes of the mental health crisis is inequality.
Yeah, she's right.
Something which they entrench through their very presence. They represent inequality in corporeal form. They represent the tyranny of rank. They represent the lack of social mobility, which leads to hopelessness. And we have seen a deep mental health crisis. William Windsor standing up and saying, this mental health crisis is awful, we need to talk. No, we need to deal with inequality, and you are a symbol of that.
He is, isn't he? I mean, this is the point, because you rightly remind us of the institution rather than the individual. And it doesn't matter. So my argument that it's not the position, it's the occupant, that's just stupid.
It's not stupid, but
You're very kind.
The theatre.
It is quite stupid.
Theatre. You're not stupid.
No, I know I'm not stupid, but that was a stupid thing what I did.
But the theatre around them has convinced you that actually, he's an okay bloke, so maybe the institution is worth preserving. But if we believe in any kind of egalitarianism, or indeed if we believe in a secular society, we cannot possibly uphold this archaic, ridiculous institution.
And if you believe that your children have got as much right to the glittering prizes as his children, then you're ridiculous in supporting the institution. Oh,
we are.
Flipping heck, Sarah. I've got this weird... Go on, carry on.
My mother told me something when I was very, very young, and some people consider this cruel, okay, but it's actually informed how I think as an adult. And she told me that I was no more important than any other child in the world.
Yeah.
That she was responsible for me, but I was no more entitled to comfort or education or play or love than any other child in the world.
That's really beautiful.
It is really beautiful. Some people told me that was a really cruel thing to tell a child, but actually it's informed how I think, it's informed how I behave, and it's informed how I view each and every human being in the world. We should all be born equal, and the fact is, in this country, we are not. And the royal family make it sugar-coated and digestible, whereas, in fact, Sarah reminds us it's pretty rank. Wow, thank you, Sarah. I feel chastised, but, it's an oil tanker. It's weird. My head is agreeing with her completely, but my heart is still playing Rule Britannia. It is, I guess, what it feels like to be one of those people that hates thinking.
So, I mean, flags are a great example, aren't they, of substitutions for thinking, thought substitutions. What do you think about that? I don't care, I'm going to wave my jolly old flag. It's great, don't have to think, wave the flag, wave the flag. So I've kind of warmed up towards the royal family in the last few years without really noticing. And as a result of that, I can read, on a day where I was swatting up on homelessness figures soaring, I can read about 369 million quid being made available to essentially do up the front room of the richest woman in the world, who is ostensibly the head of the state in which that homelessness figure is. Oh, I'm making this is better. I needed Sarah in Crystal Palace. She's put a bit of fire in my belly. And I also look at Prince William in particular and wonder if he really wants to be king. I mean, you can feel sorry for the human beings involved. But Sarah was right, wasn't she? An awful lot of love coming in for Sarah, I have to say. I mean, so much so that, you know, the state of my ego, sometimes when a caller gets absolutely bombarded with admiration and praise, I find myself bristling a little bit and feeling jealous. So we won't let Sarah on again for a while. 10:37 is the time. Duncan is in Chiswick. Duncan, what do you think?
Good morning, James.
Hello, mate.
Nice to speak to you. I'm going to pull you off as well. I changed my mind. I was quite a royalist as I was growing up because I didn't really know anything different. But then when I got older and I realised...
I can't, mate. We'll sort your phone line out. My apologies, but I'm going to start instituting zero tolerance for bad phone lines. So many people are emailing me about it. Peter is in Glasgow. Peter, what do you think?
Hi, James. Sorry, I'm not going to be as eloquent as Sarah was, but I hope...
I don't think any of us are, mate, so don't beat yourself up about it.
I was brought up and indoctrinated and brainwashed, I think, to be a royalist. Every Friday night at the Boys Brigade, I would salute the Union Jack flag and sing God Save the Queen. And then when you grow up and you start thinking about why are they there, you look at the history as why they're there. The only reason they're there is due to a religious war fought in the 1700s. They're not the true heirs to the throne.
Well, no, but would it matter if they were? Because I mean, there's always going to...
It wouldn't. But they do perpetuate religious hatred across certainly parts of West of Scotland and Northern Ireland with the Act of Settlement, which it's never got rid of. So you can't be a Catholic and be a royal. It's not allowed. That's why Meghan Markle had to get baptised in the Church of England, which it's a disgrace that we're actually having to force people to get baptised in the Church of England.
It's a bit, yeah, I mean, that is a bit, it feels a bit out of date, doesn't it? You're not allowed to be Lord Chancellor if you're
Jewish or anything like that. There'd be a national outcry.
Is that true?
Yeah, it's true. It's the law.
No, surely she'd have to, whoever marries a member of the royal family has to join the Church of England, don't they?
Why?
I don't know. I'm just saying because them's the rules.
It's the actual law. If you want to be in line to the throne, you have to become a member of the Church of England or the Church of Scotland. And it's just totally wrong.
It is, but I suppose it made sense back in the day when they were trying to sort of protect the bloodline. And there I am. I've just used the phrase protect the bloodline with a straight face.
But James, you're saying protect the bloodline. The bloodline was actually for the Stuart royal family, which was taken away because the Protestants from William Vaughan. So it's not a bloodline thing, it's a politics thing. It's a money thing.
It's money, mate. It's always money. It's always money. So what do you think? And I appreciate that this is not an approach to a serious topic that I should take every day. What's happened to someone like me? So I've hit my mid-40s. I've got children.
Same as me.
My politics historically is very much about, well, it's Christian, actually. Sorry to go back to religion, but if I had to describe it, it would be doing unto others as you'd have doing unto yourself and trying to help those less fortunate than you are. Very, very loosely and slightly virtue signally, but it is what it is. So the royal family represents the polar opposite of everything I consider to be conducive to a safer, happier, more cohesive society. And yet, somehow, in my mid-40s, I've ended up thinking they're cool.
Well, I met Princess Anne a few times.
Yeah.
And after meeting her, I think she was fantastic. And she is fantastic. She does an amazing amount of work. She does great things. But should I bow to her? Does my wife need to cut? Did
you see the Theresa May picture of her curtsying to Prince William? Oh, she looked like a baby giraffe.
See, when you start questioning the need of the royal family, you then start questioning your need of the Jacob Rees-Moggs, the actual point of the UK in itself. And dare I say it, and I'm not meaning to be anti-whatever, but little Englanders.
Well, that's what I mean by not thinking. Because it must be lovely not to have the thoughts that you've had, or not to have the deep thoughts that Sarah in Crystal Palace shared, because they're discomforting thoughts, and they make us look at the country in which we live, and they make us look at our own surroundings in quite a negative way. I'd rather not do that, and the only way I can do that is to put on some rose-tinted spectacles and start waving my flag.
I was brought up, I really hate to admit this, I was brought up a small-minded bigot.
Okay.
I hated Catholics.
Why would you hate to admit that? Because seeing as you've crossed over, you should be proud, shouldn't you, of the journey that you've made?
It's a shame to think where I was and what I used to do.
Okay.
And what I used to say.
So we're talking about sectarian entrenchment.
But also a whole lot of, the United Kingdom as a union.
Yes.
And all that gets wrapped up in this Union Jack and given to a lovely old lady.
Yes.
I'm not downgrading as an individual, but given to a lovely old lady who works hard and not being controversial. So it's hard to dislike her.
Well, actually, so I've got such clever listeners now. This tweet here it takes us back to Thomas Paine always emphasised to Edmund Burke that he opposed the monarchy, not the monarch. It was not against Louis XVI, but against the despotic principles of the government that the nation revolted. These principles had not their origin in him. God, that's good, isn't it?
Yeah, so at a time when we can't afford the NHS, we can't afford the defence system. There's a big debate about defence anyway, but you can't afford the defence system. We can't afford the welfare state. We're taking people off, their benefits that they require. When we're actually asking women to prove that they were raped for childcare, and we want to then go and give the royals money.
But you're right. It's a social decision, that, or a social priority. It's not the royals' fault. Although, one thing I do wonder, actually, Peter, they could just say don't curtsy, couldn't they? Prince William how old is he? Is he in his early 30s or something like that?
But it's also like teachers at school. They always like to get called Mr. or Mrs. They like the power.
Yeah.
Once you get rid of
and if you get rid of the weird pageantry and traditions, people would start asking more questions about why we can't get rid of the whole thing. It's like a flag of curtsy, isn't it? It's a way of not thinking. You need to doff cap, tug forelock, curtsy, bow.
And there's the Dutch king, who only recently came out as being a pilot for KLM.
He'd just been quietly flying airlines for years.
Yeah. Can you imagine Prince Charles doing that?
Not Prince Charles, no, but his... I know, I'm with you. Can I just read you quite a funny tweet and see if you agree with it? It's from Rich. He says, I don't know about anyone else, but it's actually... But actually still hearing a Jacobite on the radio in 2018 is ace.
It's not about...
I know it's not, but it was funny. Come on, man, let's just laugh.
It's perpetuation.
It is perpetuation, yeah?
It's crazy. It is crazy. I mean, I was at Buckingham Palace the day Prince George was born. And my wife taped it because they go, oh, look, our kids were watching it back in Scotland, and said, well, look, you can see Dad on the telly.
Yeah.
So I came home and watched it.
Yeah.
And Sky News and BBC News watched it, and they're saying, look at all these British people out celebrating.
Yeah.
What have you. I was the only British person there.
Well, it was all tourists.
It's all tourists. It was all tourists. They put the form, they put the picture up, and they put the name up, and the easel.
Actually, my wife was there. My wife was there as well, so it wasn't all tourists. There were some journalists as well. Thank you, Peter. 10:44 is the time. Let's squeeze in... Oh, Duncan, let's see if we've got the phone line better. Duncan, where were we?
Hi, mate. Hi. I was saying I used to be, when I grew up, being a bit of a royalist because I didn't know much else.
Yes, well, that's it. If you're not thinking much, it's...
Think about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I changed my mind when I was older. There are two principles that we should strive to live by and that we do seem to live by, which is democracy and meritocracy. And the royal family go completely against those two things.
Well, they also go against each other as well, don't forget.
Yeah.
Meritocracy and democracy are not natural bedfellows, because everybody has an equal vote, regardless of how much merit they've got.
But we can't lay aside democracy when it suits us just for an emotional reason. And that's really... That's what it seems that we do with the royal family. And there's a lot of people saying, I'm sure the Queen is a lovely old lady. Well, I don't mean to attack the Queen personally, but I'd just like to say that if I was a member of the royal family in this day and age, I don't think that I could, in all good conscience, live in that degree of luxury.
No, I think you might be right, actually.
Huge amount of guilt. And
how do you think they rationalise it? See, I think that's why the Church of England... Sorry, I'm answering my own question. How obnoxious of me. How do you think they rationalise it?
I think the only conclusion I can come to is that they don't have that much of a conscience when it comes to that kind of thing. They think that it's their birthright and they deserve it.
I go further.
Go on.
And if you look at people like, why do you think people like Jacob Rees-Mogg describe themselves as devout Catholics?
I don't know.
And the Queen is the head.
Oh, because it's a God-given right. It's made by God.
Yeah.
Well, maybe, and I
so you ignore all the bits of the Bible that tell you about how you should treat the poor, all of them, and you just focus on the fact that the divine right of kings in its purest form, but also the fact. Well, look, I go to church, therefore I can't possibly be a callous abuser of the poor because I'm in church and I'm a valued member of the congregation, and I did the reading last Christmas. Therefore, it's ridiculous. I might well be presiding over policies that are going to further impoverish the most vulnerable people in society. But I go to church, so I can't be bad. I think that's how they justify it.
Yeah, perhaps. So
I've got to crack on, Duncan. Heading for the break. Interesting journey. This. The problem is, I am feeling my old republicanism growing, but I don't. You need to find a way of directing it at the institution, at the throne, not the monarch, don't you? At the positions, not the individuals. Until people like Duncan and Sarah set the old grey cells whirring. But every multi-millionaire in the world theoretically could do a lot more to help people. We could do more to help people. It's something about the size of the gap, you know? Otherwise you end up sounding like one of those idiots who says you're not allowed to believe that refugees should be rescued from drowning in the Mediterranean unless you put them all in your own back bedroom. You can't lay it all on the Queen. All of us could give more to charity than we currently do. Almost all of us. I don't know. This is interesting. 10:47. Theo Usherwood is here. I like everybody else who has the radio on in the office. I only have one ear on it before I come on air. And I found myself this morning hearing Boris Johnson being described in ways of, well, it sounded like being stolen from my programme. There's an Ian Dale trail running at the moment where the penny finally seems to have dropped with him, lifelong Conservative supporter. And the breakfast show, which historically was like a sofa for Boris Johnson to sort of recline on while grapes were dropped lovingly into his gob, has also been reporting an astonishing revelation involving the former mayor, wherein, well, Theo Usherwood's here to tell us what this is a big story.
This is a big story.
This is a big story.
The Victoria Embankment is going to be closed for 6 months from next April in order to move a gas mains that goes underneath the road in order to make way for the new super sewer. To give you an indication, it can carry 500 Olympic swimming pools worth of excrement between Acton in the west and Limehouse in the east. Now, Transport for London officials advised the mayor's team, don't start work on your cycle superhighway, the segregated bit along the embankment just yet, because we're going to have to close the road again in order to move the gas mains to make way for that super sewer.
Yeah.
But Boris Johnson, who was aware of that request, ignored it because he wanted to complete his cycle superhighway before he left office in May 2016 and was succeeded by Labour's Sadiq Khan. He wanted to have the prestige of actually finishing the project. And I've been told by sources who advised the advice, don't proceed with this project.
So he was just hoping it wouldn't come out, or he didn't even think
he wanted it completed. He wanted the project.
Are we supposed to call it the Boris Superhighway? Was that the idea?
Exactly. This is something that he had done in office. And since we went on air this morning, I've got hold of some advice from which was in the TfL board papers from February 2015. This is the month before work started, and this is TfL advice. In line with TfL's network management duty, TfL is collaborating with a number of third-party developers and projects to ensure that construction works are coordinated and the congestion and disruption to vehicles and pedestrians would be kept to a minimum as far as possible. For example, TfL officers meet frequently with developers such as the Thames Tideway Tunnel to develop mutually compatible construction programs and explore opportunities for piggybacking temporary road closures to avoid multiple traffic diversions. Disruption to major events such as the London Marathon and Trooping the Colour would be avoided. But that advice hasn't been heeded because they went ahead, built the cycle superhighway. And now, of course, you have...
his fingerprints are all over it. I mean, you don't need to overcomplicate it. He was told this was going to happen. He said, I don't care, do it.
Exactly. 13 months of disruption, and now got another 6 months.
Why didn't someone else give him a slap, metaphorically speaking? Same with the bridge.
You wanted it done.
And how much money?
£10 million.
And the bridge?
That's standing at 50 million. But the TfL are saying this morning that they're going to keep the cycle superhighway open.
Right.
But the road is closing. So motorists, hundreds of thousands of journeys along that road they're going to have to find alternative routes while the gas mains is moved. And of course, commuters who use that route will have to face even longer delays and disruptions, as well as the 13 months that they've already had to endure when they were installing the cycle lane.
Just by way of balance, he did, of course, keep his word on Heathrow.
No, did he?
It's 10:54. You're listening to Theo Ashwood and James O'Brien on LBC. In fact, you sort of think of that patrician sense of entitlement that's displayed by Boris Johnson, even though, the history's not on his side. He's very, very, very good example of how walking the walk and talking the talk allows you to co-opt the trappings of inherited aristocratic status. I don't know enough about Rees-Mogg. I know his father was editor of the Times. I don't know what his sort of great-grandparents were, but quite often the ones who are most pantomime-like in their toffishness, your Rees-Moggs and your Johnsons, are the ones that have put it on like a suit. I saw it a bit at school, although my school, although posh enough, is nothing like Eton. But at Eton, there comes a point in around about your third year there when you're doing your GCSEs. So look at Prince William's accent and look at Jacob Rees-Mogg's. They both made a decision about their accent. This is the odd thing about being relatively class fluid. It's what a public school gives you. My accent was a lot more estuarine when I was in my early 20s. I went through that sort of Mockney phase. And it's a conscious thing. You do, on some level, know that you're doing it. So if you talk like Jacob Rees-Mogg, you have decided to talk like that. If you talk like Prince William, who sounds considerably less posh... You remember when the Queen said that Margaret Thatcher was far too grand for the likes of us, reportedly. These are the conscious decisions. So the trappings of what you could call faux toffery, the top hats and the monocles, the Jacob Rees-Mogg school of poshness... That wouldn't exist, would it, if it wasn't for the royal family being the real deal? So you see that entrenched privilege and inherited entitlement that the royal family represents, and then some people aspire to copying it, whereas in fact we should all aspire to removing it, because that way we become as one. We're all equal. I've got something clever to tell you, actually. It's something I saw on Facebook yesterday. There's a phrase you don't hear very often, but I'll share it with you soon. Julia's been waiting long enough in Carnarvonshire. Julia, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi, James.
Hello,
divine right of kings for Boris Johnson, huh?
Isn't it? Yes. Well, you have to think on some level he must see himself as being superior to the rest of us. Otherwise, nothing else makes sense.
Well, how he can say what he said to business people.
Well, exactly that.
Not very good. Anyway, I'm ringing to tell you it's okay.
Yes.
You're not... Well, I bet you changed your mind. You are just human. And the job you do every day, and you're telling us what's going on in this country, and very few other people are, and it must get so depressing that you're hanging on for grim death to something that's positive to keep you going, as is everybody else in this country.
We've got the football.
Let's have a party.
We've got the football.
Well, yeah, okay. Well, I'm a woman. I'm not very into football, but you're trying to look at something. I mean, we have no constitution in this country, which is frightening. But so maybe we're expecting the Queen to say, "Excuse me, I'm the head of state. We don't want to do this," but she doesn't. She doesn't.
No, and that's
maybe
what...
we're going into realms of fantasy, but I don't want you to feel upset about yourself. You do this job where you're making people think, and you make me think.
You're very kind.
Everybody think.
No, some people like to rage. Everyone who's not thinking is raging. Look, here's one.
Yeah, but raging is a waste of energy.
Yeah, you know that, and I know that, but it's all they've got, so we can't deny them. O'Brien, you maggot, the royal family isn't going anywhere. That's one of them. How could you have listened to the last 57 minutes of this programme and thought...
Are they trying to say they're aliens and they're going to leave the planet or something? I don't know what that person was trying to say.
And the other point is, of course, Katie picked up on this as well just before you came on the line in a tweet to Mr. James O.B. when she said it's the illusion of someone being like the grown-ups. There is ultimately someone in charge, and they play into that psychology, don't they, a bit?
It's desperation, but I mean...
Desperation.
I mean, if they
what's the alternative?
Job, they could just retire on their private estates and go. I mean, you're talking about the Crown Estates paying for it.
Yes.
The Queen owns the Crown Estates.
Does she?
So she's only giving 25%.
Of her own profits.
We're playing the rest of it.
What was the other thing I was going to say? The curtsying. That's a bit of a deal breaker, actually, as I try and support my royalist credentials, because you couldn't. How could you have anyone curtsying at you? You'd feel like such a loon. So get up, you silly woman. What are you curtsying for? I know you have to bow.
Okay. It's because people don't know. They feel they get to a certain stage in their life and they think, oh, right, I'm with all the brilliant guys now. I'm with all the top class now, so therefore I have to curtsy. It's ridiculous. I do agree. And I couldn't curtsy anyway because I can't walk. But I don't know what they're doing. I think people are so desperate. People would rather go down the pub and have a party. And if that's an excuse...
Bread and circuses. Bread and circuses. I know that you're bedbound. We've spoken before, haven't we? Just for people who feel that I'm glossing over you, mentioning that you can't walk.
You're getting me thinking, so I'm thinking about this subject.
Yeah, be careful there, Julia. You know where thinking leads. Never ends well. Take care of yourself, and thank you for the lovely words. It's coming up to 11 o'clock. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Thanks for that, everyone. That was lovely, wasn't it? It was just sort of having a bit of a day off from Brexit, because even I get a little bit bored of saying I told you so. And if you're one of the people that I told, you must be absolutely sick to death of hearing it by now. So we're just briefly mentioning that Nissan has now joined BMW, Siemens, Airbus in warning. Well, they've actually essentially said they're going to suspend investment until they know there's a plan. Or until they know what the plan is. There's no guarantee when they know what the plan is that they'll start investment again. And I think for me the strangest Brexit story of the day, the sickest Brexit story of the day, is Lord Ashcroft, big bankroller of the Leave campaign, writing a blog advising businesses to use Malta as their EU base after Brexit, because it turns out they're going to need one.